My wife cheated with her ex for months, and they planned to steal my $500K company. But when we got to court, and my lawyer revealed my mom was the real owner, I left her with nothing, and now she lives with her lover at his mother's house. I'm 35 years old. I run a tech consulting company that I basically built from scratch. And I need to tell this story because what happened with my ex-wife Emily a few months ago still has me processing everything. Like I need to get it out of my system. The thing is, I was married for 2 years to someone who turned out to be completely different from what I thought, and she almost took me to financial disaster if it weren't for my mom being smarter than me and seeing things coming that I didn't even imagine. I guess I should start from the beginning, when everything seemed perfect and I was basically a love-struck idiot not seeing the warning signs that were there all along. I met Emily like 4 years ago at a networking event, one of those boring ones where everyone's there drinking cheap wine and pretending they're interested in what everyone else does. She worked in public relations for a mid-sized firm. Nothing spectacular, but not bad either, and the truth is she caught my attention immediately because she was one of those people who light up a room when they walk in. You know what I mean? We talked all night, and it turned out we had a ton of things in common. Or at least that's what I thought at the time. Looking back, she was probably just really good at telling people what they wanted to hear. We started dating and everything was incredibly fast. Like within 6 months, we were already living together, and a year and a half later, we got married in a not too big but nice wedding. With like 100 people, at a vineyard outside the city. By then, my business was already pretty well established. I had started the tech consulting company 10 years earlier, when I was 25 and basically had nothing but a laptop and a lot of desire to work. The first years were brutal. I'm not going to lie. I worked like 80 hours a week, ate ramen almost every day, and there were moments when I thought maybe I should just give up and look for a normal job. But little by little, I started getting clients, building reputation, and by the time I met Emily, the company already had like 15 employees and was billing well. I mean, we weren't Microsoft, but we were doing really well. Emily knew all this from the beginning, obviously, and when we got married, she decided to leave her job in public relations because, according to her, she wanted to focus on building our life together and eventually having kids. I didn't see any problem with that, honestly. I was making enough for both of us, and I thought we were on the same team, that we were building something together. She took care of the house, organized things, and I kept working on the business that kept growing more and more. We had a nice house in a good neighborhood, 2 cars, a BMW for me and an Audi Q5 for her. We went on vacation twice a year. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. My friends told me I was lucky. My family thought Emily was great, and I honestly believed I had found my person, the one you were going to grow old with and all that shit. But like 6 months before everything exploded, Emily started to change. At first, it was small things that I easily justified, like she was colder with me, less interested in what I did, spent a lot more time on her phone. When I got home from work, she barely looked up, and in bed, she basically turned her back on me every night. I tried to talk to her several times, asked her if everything was okay, if something was bothering her, but she always said she was fine, just tired or stressed about house stuff. I wanted to believe her because, well, she was my wife, and you're supposed to trust your wife, right? But something inside me knew things weren't right. I just didn't want to admit it. The truth came out in the most cliché way possible. Emily had left her laptop open in the living room on a Tuesday afternoon. I think it was in March or April last year. I don't remember exactly. I had come home, early from work because I had a headache, and just wanted to rest for a bit. The laptop was there on the couch, the screen on, and normally I'm not one of those people who check their partner's devices because I always thought that was a sign of insecurity or distrust. But right at that moment, I saw a message pop up on the screen. It was from someone named Zachary, and it said something like, "Can't wait for this to be over so we can finally be together for real." My stomach dropped to the floor immediately. I literally felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I sat down and started reading the conversation, and believe me when I tell you that every message I read was worse than the last. Zachary turned out to be her ex-boyfriend, a guy she'd dated like 5 years before meeting me, and apparently they'd been in contact this whole time, or at least the last 8 months, according to the messages I could see. But it wasn't just that she was talking to her ex, which is already weird, it was what they were saying. There were explicitly sexual messages. Photos she'd sent him, photos she never sent me, by the way. And worst of all, detailed conversations about how she was going to divorce me and take half of everything I had. I read message after message where they basically planned my financial destruction. Emily was telling this guy, Zachary, who from what I could see on his profile, was an unemployed loser in his 30s, still living with his mother, that the plan was to hold out in the marriage a little longer to make sure she could claim half the business in the divorce. There were messages where she said things like, I just have to wait a little longer and then we're going to have enough money to live well the rest of our lives. And he's so stupid, he doesn't realize anything. This is going to be easier than I thought. Zachary responded with equally disgusting things, like, you're going to be so rich, and finally we'll be able to be together like we always. I sat there on the couch for I don't know how long, maybe an hour, just reading and rereading the messages because I couldn't process what I was seeing. The woman I had married, with whom I had planned to have children, with whom I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life. I had basically been using me as an ATM while sleeping with her ex and planning to steal everything I had worked to build for 10 years. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, betrayal, disgust, all at the same time. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the laptop, and I think at some point I started crying, although I'm not completely sure, because that whole day is kind of blurry in my memory. When Emily got home like 2 hours later, I was still there on the couch with her laptop open. She came in with shopping bags, humming something, totally carefree, until she saw me and saw the expression on my face and saw what was on the screen. The color literally disappeared from her face, and for a second she was completely frozen in the living room doorway. Then she tried to do what I guess all people do when they get caught. She started with excuses and denials. She told me it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just silly messages, that Zachary was just a friend and they were joking. But I'm not an idiot. The messages were clear as day, and she knew it. I said, Emily, you're sleeping with Zachary, and she finally stopped trying to deny it. She sat down on the armchair across from me and basically admitted everything. She said yes, they had reconnected months ago. Yes, they were seeing each other, and yes, she was unhappy in our marriage and wanted a divorce. But then, and this is what really made me explode, she had the nerve to tell me that she deserved half of everything because she had sacrificed her career to be with me, and that it was basically fair that she got compensation for that. I looked at her like she had 3 heads because I couldn't believe this. Woman's audacity. She had been cheating on me for months, planning to rob me, and now she was playing the victim. I told her to leave the house that same night, that I never wanted to see her again, but she refused. She said that legally it was her house too and she didn't have to go anywhere, that if anyone was leaving it should be me. Then I did something I'm proud of to this day. I smiled at her, a smile that probably looked a little psychotic, and I said, Emily, go ahead, file for divorce, but I don't think things are going to turn out the way you and your unemployed boyfriend have planned. She asked me what I meant by that, and I simply told her she was going to find out soon. The confusion and fear on her face in that moment was one of the few satisfactions I had in that whole mess. The thing is, my mom, Barbara, is an incredibly smart woman when it comes to business. She was the one who helped me start the company 10 years ago, not just emotionally, but also with some initial capital. And when the business started to grow and I started dating Emily, my mom told me something that at the time seemed paranoid to me, but turned out to be the best decision of my life. She said, Jonathan, I don't trust that woman. Something doesn't add up with her, and I think you should protect your assets before getting married. At the time, I got a little angry because I thought my mom was being unfair to Emily, but my mom insisted and convinced me to put the business and several important assets legally in her name, as a kind of protection. It wasn't anything illegal or weird. We basically structured everything so that on paper, my mom was the owner of the company, although I was still the one operating it and making all the decisions. We did it with proper contracts with lawyers and everything, where it was clear that I was the beneficiary of everything, and that my mom only had legal ownership for asset protection reasons. We also put several of our properties and accounts under the same scheme. When I married Emily, all of this was already in place. And the best part is that Emily never knew exactly how everything was structured because she was never interested in asking too much. She just saw that there was money, and that we were living well. Like 2 very tense weeks passed, where Emily and I basically didn't talk, but were still living in the same house. She slept in the guest room and I in the master bedroom, and the atmosphere was absolutely toxic. Finally, she hired a lawyer and sent me the divorce papers, demanding half of everything, half the business, half the house, half the bank accounts, alimony, everything. Her lawyer had prepared a very aggressive lawsuit where they basically painted Emily as the sacrificing wife who had left her promising career to support me while I built my empire, and who now deserved to be properly compensated. It was a completely false narrative, but I knew some judges buy it, especially if the other side isn't prepared. I hired my own lawyer, one of the best in divorces and asset protection in the city, and showed him everything. The messages I had found, the legal structure of my properties, and the business, everything. My lawyer basically smiled and told me this was going to be interesting. We went to the first mediation session like a month later. I think it was in May, and that's where everything got good. Emily's lawyer started with his prepared speech about how she deserved half of everything, and my lawyer just patiently waited for him to finish. Then, when it was his turn, my lawyer pulled out all the documents showing that the business wasn't in my name but in my mother's, that it had been that way since before the marriage, and that therefore Emily had no legal right to it. Emily's lawyer's face was one of the most satisfying things I've ever seen in my life. You could literally see the moment he realized his entire case was crumbling. Emily was sitting there completely pale, looking at me, with pure hatred, and I just sat there calm, not saying anything. Her lawyer asked for a recess to talk to her privately, and when they came back, they basically tried to argue that it was a fraudulent maneuver to prevent Emily from getting what she deserved, but my lawyer had all the documents showing that the structure was completely legal and had been established years before I even met Emily. Things got worse from there. Emily, realizing she wasn't going to get what she wanted, started a smear campaign on social media and with mutual friends. She posted things on Facebook and Instagram about how I was an abusive and controlling husband, how I had manipulated her into leaving her job and now was leaving her with nothing, basically painting me as the villain. Some of our friends believed her because she's very convincing when she wants to be, and I lost some friendships in the process. But most of the people who really knew me knew it was all lies. She also tried to get my mom in, legal trouble, requesting financial audits, and all kinds of things to prove the ownership structure was fake. But every time they investigated, they found that everything was completely legal and well documented. The divorce process dragged on for like 6 months total, with multiple hearings and mediation sessions that basically went nowhere because Emily refused to accept that she wasn't going to get what she wanted. Her lawyer eventually recommended that she accept a modest settlement because they had no case, but she insisted on going to trial, thinking some judge was going to take pity on her. During all that time, I kept working, keeping the business running, although it definitely was one of the most stressful periods of my life. There were days when I'd get home, well, to the apartment I had rented after finally getting Emily out of the house, and just wanted to get in bed and never come out. But I knew I couldn't afford that luxury, because I had employees who depended on me and clients who needed our services. We finally got to court like 3 months ago. The trial lasted 2 days and was basically a show of lawyers presenting evidence and arguments. Emily's lawyer did his best, painting her as a victim, showing photos of our happy wedding, talking about how she had left her career, all that spiel. But then my lawyer presented the messages between Emily and Zachary, and believe me, the atmosphere in the room changed immediately. The judge, a woman of like 60 years old, who looked like she didn't let anyone fool her, read the messages with an increasingly stern expression. My lawyer also presented all the documents showing that the business had always been in my mother's name, that Emily had never contributed to it financially in any way, and that the ownership structure was completely legal and prior to the marriage. When the judge gave her verdict, it was pretty clear. She basically said that Emily had no legal right to the business because it had never been mine during the marriage, that the evidence of infidelity and manipulation worked against her, and that while she would normally consider some kind of alimony given the circumstances that she had left her job, the evidence that she had planned this whole situation from the beginning made her undeserving of that benefit. She awarded Emily a small portion of our personal bank accounts, which honestly was money I didn't care about losing, and that was it. She didn't get the house, she didn't get part of the business, she didn't get alimony, She basically came out with almost nothing after 2 years of marriage and months trying to destroy me. I left the courthouse that day feeling lighter than I had felt in months. Emily was crying outside the courthouse, with Zachary there trying to console her, which was ironic considering he was probably part of the reason she had lost everything. I didn't feel a shred of sympathy for her, honestly. She had tried to ruin me, had planned to steal what I had worked 10 years to build, and now she was paying the consequences of her actions. My mom was there with me when we left the courthouse, and she just hugged me and said, "I told you so." And I couldn't do anything but laugh, because yes, she had told me, and I should have listened to her more. From the beginning, the divorce was officially finalized like 2 months ago. Emily had to move out completely, and from what I heard, she went to live with Zachary at his mother's house, which I guess is the kind of poetic karma you can't make up. I moved back into our house, or, well, my house now, and little by little I've been removing all the things that reminded me of her and that period of my life. I've gone back to focusing completely on the business, which is now growing more than ever. Ironic considering all the personal drama I was going through during that time. Do I regret marrying her? Honestly, yes. It was 2 years of my life that I basically wasted with someone who never really loved me, who only saw me as a bank check. But at the same time, I learned important lessons about trusting my instincts and the people who really know me and care about me, like my mom. I also learned that not everyone deserves your trust just because they say the right words or because they look good on paper. Emily was an expert at telling people what they wanted to hear, and I swallowed it all like a love-struck idiot. A week ago, I ran into one of our mutual friends. Well, ex-mutual, because after the divorce we don't talk much anymore. And he told me that Emily is trying to get back into public relations work, but basically nobody wants to hire her because word got around in the industry about all the divorce drama. Apparently she tried to sue some people for defamation, but that didn't go well for her either. I'm not going to lie. A small, petty part of me felt satisfied hearing that, although the more mature part of me just wants to forget she was ever in my life. Now I'm completely focused on moving forward. I haven't started dating anyone new yet, because honestly I need time to process everything and to trust my own judgment again when it comes to relationships. My friends keep telling me I should try again, that not all women are like Emily, and I know they're right, but for now I'm fine being alone. Working on my business and rebuilding the life I almost lost because of someone who turned out to be completely different from who I thought she was. And that's enough for now, I guess.